I'd like to welcome the members of the European Parliament as well. Now to get back to business, FSA did not meet 3 of its performance goals, Mr. Hurt, 2 of which specifically related to customer service. There are only 2 performance metrics that evaluate customer service, so FSA did not meet either of its customer service goals. What is causing this failure?
So the goals that you referenced, one was the American Customer Satisfaction Index. That is it's a way that we can measure customer satisfaction that is consistent with what many.
My question is what caused the failures? So I don't need a description.
Sorry.
And not to be rude, but just for sake of time, please.
So the causes were twofold for the ACSI score. One was there was a methodology change. To be more consistent with the way the score is calculated with others in the industry, we switched to it was either from phone to an email interaction. I think that's the way it went. That was one cause. Another cause was most likely things associated with changes to the way we work. For example, we implemented FSA ID to improve security, and that more than likely had an impact on satisfaction as well. So we had to back to that trade-off of ensure some security for our applicants and the folks, the customers that use our service. But it was at the detriment to some extent to the satisfaction and ease with which those good actors can use it.
To what extent do you consider how you can improve service to help reduce administrative errors by others that cause improper payments? So when I look at the GAO report on where most of these improper payments occur, and this may or may not apply to in this situation, but it's just insufficient documentation, the inability to authenticate, process errors. I think that's what we're talking about now. So,
the bulk of the errors, or probably the most significant, is around errors of eligibility. So it's misreported income or misreported other aspects on the application. That's what the DRT helps us greatly with. It does help us with the misreporting of income. In addition to DRT, school verification can be very helpful in identifying mistakes in eligibility. So that's where a lot of our focus is on that.
When you talk about misreported income, Mr. Drager, how much of that's fraud? I mean, in your testimony, you mentioned that student fraud ring activity had increased 82% from 2009 to 2013. How much of that's fraud, and how much of an ability do we have to catch that?
It's difficult for me to give an exact percentage of how much is fraud versus just honest mistakes. What we will say, what we see on campuses are that those who are interested in committing fraud have a very specific and targeted way that they pursue their fraudulent activities. And in recent years, schools have found ways to then defend against that sort of fraud. A lot of times when it comes to improper payments with income reporting, it appears to be honest mistakes, confusion about which tax year students or families should be using. So to the extent that this can be automated and we can get a secure IRS data retrieval tool back working, that seems to be one of the best solutions.
General Ty, you want to comment on that?
Yes, I do. I would just point out one thing we need to keep in mind is the DOT is a fine tool. We would totally agree with that. It is not going to catch fraud, because people who want to defraud the government, the fraud rings we were talking about, based on usually representing your income to be zero, they aren't using the DRT. So it's not going to help with that.
So the checks go directly to the fraudsters and not to the schools?
Well, the checks, yes, will go to the credit balance. The balance that doesn't cover tuition and room and board will go to the students. And to and the students really aren't students; they're fraudsters.
Getting off maybe just a little bit, if the chairman will indulge me. is there instances of fraud where there are fake institutions? I mean, we've had this with Medicaid where there were people filing for Medicaid reimbursements and they were non-existent entities. Does that happen in this case, General Ty? Do we know of any of that?
I'm not aware.
Okay, let me ask you one other quick question. In your fiscal year 2016 audit, finds issues in departments reported estimates and methodology. What did you specifically find with regard to challenges with the estimates?
Specifically, we found a couple of things, which were that they included some program reviews that weren't geared toward finding improper payments. So they would deal, like there was one that dealt with a cohort default rate. So that should have been excluded from the sample of program reviews. And there were issues like that. We did recalculate the improper payments rate estimate, and those, correcting for those mistakes, really only made a marginal increase in the improper payment rate. So we did not consider them to be hugely significant errors, but they were errors that they need to deal with.
Thank you. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. The chair recognizes the ranking member, Ms. Demings, for a generous 5 minutes.